We found out about what this guy's age is. He's 28. It's really hard for me to fathom that he's just getting started perpetrating this kind of behavior at 28 years of age.
Hello and welcome to True Crime Rocket Science, the most authentic voice in true crime. So here is another expert hinting that Kohberger could be a serial killer. Strange, I don't see it.
Universities, I believe, to get away from their earlier crimes, and as did Kohberger and Bundy both. So it's going to be interesting to see how this plays out over the next couple of days and see if I hate to say it, but other victims.
That's a pretty heavy hitter, Chris Swecker, a former assistant FBI director. And he's saying that he thinks that there could be a link. He's associating Kohberger essentially with Ted Bundy. Is that reasonable or rational? And bear in mind, it is a situation of he's innocent until proven guilty. He should be regarded as innocent until proven otherwise. But I have to say, I don't see it. I wrote 5 books on Henry van Breda, a guy who axed his family to death. And the first question wasn't, had he done this before? It took a while for that same question to come up in the Watts case as well. And in neither of those cases was it ever proved or likely even. And so what is the situation here? So if you say he is a serial killer, then that's one narrative. I don't believe that that is even likely. So what is likely? And so in my opinion, the gratuitousness of the crimes here isn't due, in my opinion, to a gradual journey as a killer, but instead a journey through loneliness. A journey through loneliness which reached a peak at the end of his stale, stagnant student journey. The killer found, at the time that the crime was committed, that his peers, their student careers were reaching a peak. And that was associated with partying and celebrating. We also had the Isla Vista crime take place at the end of the semester. So we have the same situation really taking place here. The momentum, the feverish partying, the spirit of life is aggregating, generating, building up. And how invalidating is that to someone who's not participating in that? So that's how I see it. Now, my former co-author, Lisa, sent me these screen grabs from Reddit, apparently from Kohberger's mother, talking about his loneliness. And we're going to deal with that in more detail in this analysis. But before we get to that, if you haven't subscribed to the channel, please do. If you have subscribed, welcome to True Crime Rocket Science. We do try to be authentic here. We do try to anchor what we say in reality, in the truth. And so I am a little bit embarrassed about yesterday's story. It was the last story I did at about 3 o'clock in the morning. And about 8 minutes after I posted it, I received, I understood that it is very likely not true. It was a woman who gave her name and last name, first name and last name, and allowed herself to be recorded giving her story. And all of that seemed to suggest that it could be credible. And would have been a huge moment if it was a confession. If he had said, I cut them, something like that. And of course, it was a bit too good to be true, and it looks like it was exactly that. In any event, this channel endeavors to have high standards, so that sort of thing isn't something we really want to do. So if you felt suckered into that, I apologize. I was also suckered into it. It was really a waste of my time at 3 o'clock in the morning when I could have been sleeping. In terms of this analysis, if you're enjoying this episode, please like, share, leave a comment. Also, bear in mind, I'm not doing live streams because of frequent load shedding, frequent power failures where I am. About 4 hours a day, electricity going off, and it's just difficult to dodge. So I'm not earning any super chats. So if you do enjoy this analysis, don't be shy to hit the thanks button. And after all that, let's get started. So obviously, once again, we've got to think critically about these posts. Are they genuine? Lisa in her message to me wrote that if this is indeed his mom, Marion, which it seems like it is, Brian moved to Washington sometime in the week of June 20th. And bear in mind, it was Kaylee's birthday, June 22nd. Lisa writes, I find it odd that she's so worried about him being so lonely. He's a 28-year-old man. Of course, every parent wants the best for you, but at the same time, this should be seen as an exciting move for a well-adjusted adult. She goes on to write, also interesting, Lisa writes, I'm reading this off my phone, of messages that she sent. She says that he went to Washington about 2 months before class started. Not knowing anybody there, what did he do for those 2 months from late June to mid-August? And then she goes on to write, his mom crying for days over a fully grown son moving is a window into the mom-son dynamic. Again, if this is true, if it's credible. As is his dad flying cross-country to drive home with him. And I think she said that she sourced this on Plunder on Paula's channel, and that it was also seen in the Reddit post above. And so it's pretty interesting, isn't it? Now, if we accept the spirit of these posts, someone saying, hi friends, today my 26-year-old son left for Washington State to begin his doctorate in criminology. We live in Pennsylvania. I probably won't be submitting many designs in the next few days because I will be too busy crying. I will see you all soon. Well, obviously, the problem with that is that he was 28 years old, and he should have arrived this year. So it seems very close to what we're looking for, but shouldn't it be a 27 or 28-year-old son? As far as I know, he turned 28 in November. So you may scoff and say, well, once again, that's not true, it's not genuine, but you can actually draw some symbolic reality out of that, which is just this idea of loneliness. And so on this idea, is he a serial killer, or did his loneliness just sort of get the better of him? I mean, how can you have any agency if you're alone? How can you have life if you have no social life, if all you have is social death? And in Kohberger's case, he's surrounded by people, which makes his exclusion from paradise so much more excruciating. So it burns him, it taunts him, what he sees every day. And so doesn't he retreat into fantasy, introspection, into crime, criminal law, and yes, coveting as well. Coveting turns to envy, envy to jealousy, jealousy to frustration, and frustration, question mark, to murderous hatred. But what lies at the heart of it? It's something that we all take for granted, simply not being connected, not being able to connect, not being able to establish that glue with anyone else. Simple aloneness leading to loneliness, becoming brokenness, addiction, dysfunction, and finally with no light outside or inside to sustain him. Well, what is the end result? A heart of darkness. I would be interested to know if Kohberger did any sport, because that's one way to lighten that heaviness and one way to exorcise the demons. So one does wonder whether he did he run in the last days, in the last months. What was his running career like? Also, how can you have sexual potency if you have no sexual partners? How can you individuate? How can you become something, which after all is what college is really a platform for, if you're diminishing, if you're slipping into obscurity, in full view of the society that you're supposed to be part of, the society that's supposed to take you along with them in their tide, wash you along, with those currents. And instead what happens, it washes on, leaving you washed up on a long, lonely strand. To really intuit the kind of loneliness that we're talking about that leads someone to commit a crime, to kill somebody, I think you've got to try and imagine being the only person on an entire world, on an entire planet. That's what it feels like. One Martian on Mars. And ironically, the same person who played that role, Matt Damon, also played one Dr. Man on an ice planet in a faraway galaxy that no one could reach. Have you ever seen the movie Interstellar? Do you remember this scene?
Pray you never learn just how good it can be to see another face.
Now again, you might say, what are you doing? This is not research. This is an analogy. I have said in the past, we use two approaches in True Crime Rocket Science. We use first principles, what is the nature of something? And then we also use analogies, including from media, from movies, from music. And I tried to do that in the previous video, looking at song lyrics, because that is in the same way that we draw to some extent who we are from what we listen to, what we watch, what we read. Well, so does a criminal. And so those analogies are very important in terms of intuiting the operative psychology. In the mythos, the fictional mythos of Interstellar, Dr. Man is awakened. He's sort of Lazarus awakened from the dead. Within a very short time, he kills two people in the mythos of the story. He's a lonely, lonely man lost in space who's struggling to get back home and is willing to transact the lives of his own rescuers, these people around him, in order to get where he feels he needs to go. That alone is a very useful analogy. Now, coming back to these experts who seem to feel that Kohberger not only committed the crime, but is actually a serial killer, has committed other crimes. It could be me. It could be me that simply can't see. But I have an impression true crime has become extremely indoctrinated by serial killer media this year in particular. We had the Dahmer and Bundy series, documentaries, played on Netflix recently. And just as it seems to have addled the minds of experts and true crime, it may actually have entered the thought process of this killer. If you're studying crime, why wouldn't he have watched some of these things? Why wouldn't it have come up during the course of classes and as part of the curriculum? On October 13th last year, right, precisely a month before the Idaho student killings, Women's Health profiled 18 serial killer documentaries to watch. And that was, so you would watch the documentary Monster, the Jeffrey Dahmer story, and then you'd get so addicted to that, caught up in that, what other serial killer documentaries can we watch? And so Women's Health profiled 18 of them. That is a lot. And so do you see, if this crime-related fodder was top of mind for us, why wouldn't it be in the headspace of our killer? If it was in our media timeline, well, then obviously it was in the media timeline of the killer, whoever he is. So why wouldn't he be nourishing himself with a supply of stimuli from the same media trough? And we know that BTK was essentially part of the curriculum at WSU, wasn't it? So for me, what I don't see, these wrinkled custodians and librarians of crime, I don't see them able to put their stubby toes back into the socks and shoes of being a student. That's really the way to figure this case out. What is it like? What is it like being a student? What is it like being an unhappy student? What is it like being a lonely student when all about you are losing their virginity and having fun and partying and having this sort of gratuitous experience that you're supposed to have? What is it like when you're missing out on all that? So the killer in this case, I believe, is hardly a seasoned expert serial killer. Think about it. He was caught, unlike dozens of seasoned serial killers, within just 50 days of his crime, and he made some incredibly daft mistakes. If he had been stalking the area, didn't he notice all the cameras surrounding the house? Besides that, trying to kill 4 people in a creaking house with 6 people inside it with a knife. Another mistake, leaving his own DNA at the scene, leaving the door open, driving to the scene in his own vehicle, killing victims well known to the surrounding neighborhood. Many killers take years to be found out takes a long time just to find out that it's actually happening. And it tends to start with one victim, another victim, let alone court. And I've also never heard anyone ask of a mass shooter, and I've written 2 books on them. I think he must have killed before. It does seem, in terms of the poll that I put up, it is very early in the poll, but at 60-40, it seems like most of you agree with the experts. Yes, that he has committed other crimes. Well, he's got no criminal record thus far, and so time will tell whether this is the first crime. And who knows, maybe the assistant director of the FBI, maybe he's right after all. Maybe if you've watched all of those serial killer documentaries, you have figured out that this killer fits the profile. Well, have you? Thank you for listening, and I'll see you guys next time.